So in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to quickly get a 3D scan, quad remesh it in Blender, unwrap it, and then reproject the diffuse texture to the unwrapped quad remeshed version. So first things first, go to File, Import, and choose your file type. So in my case I have an OBJ. Go to your folder, double click on the file you want to open, or just hit Open OBJ or FBX or whatever you have. Here we have the object. First step we need to do is to create a material. So go to your material properties down here. And if one is already created, you're fine. If not, it would look like this, and then you would click New. And it would create this principled BSDF. Actually, you don't really need it. Oh yeah, you do. Next step is to create a texture. So to add the texture from your 3D scan. So for this, you just split your view by going up in the corner here, clicking and dragging, and now you split your view. Then change your editor type to shader editor. You can hide this bar by hitting N. And the easiest way to add all the nodes for an image texture, so you could you could add your image texture here by going to image, going to texture, and then hit image texture. Get this menu by hitting Shift A. Oh yeah, my screencasts are not on. I'm sorry. Where are they? Yeah. It was disabled for some reason. Okay, now you can see my my shortcuts. So Shift A, texture, image texture. Or something you need anyway is the node wrangler add-on, which really helps you while using nodes in Blender. So go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons. So if you're here, go to Add-ons, type in Node, and then you will have this unchecked if you did not enable it yet. So enable this, save your preferences down here. And now you can just add this by selecting your shader and hitting Ctrl T. And this will also add the texture coordinate node and the mapping node, which you don't really need if you only have one UV space on your mesh. And if it's just a plain 3D scan, you probably don't even need this, but usually you do, so that's why it creates these. So load in your image texture, click Open, go to your folder, and then select this. If you want to see how it looks, if you're not sure if it's the right one, just go to Viewport Shading here and select it to, and then change this to Material Preview. Just wait a sec, and if then you would see your material. So you can also hide this tool menu by hitting T for tool. And yeah, now you can see your texture. So this is looking alright. And the next step is, so you can also see, check your texture unshaded. So here you can see the texture with the principled BSDF. If you want to see it unshaded, just hit Ctrl Shift and click your texture, and then it will create an emission shader basically. So you would have the same result by Shift A, shader, and choosing the emission shader, and then plugging that output into the surface and your texture into the color, and you would have the same result. You can delete any node by hitting X like this, and we connect or preview shader nodes also by just hitting, it doesn't work with this viewer node. Okay, I'm just going to delete this by hitting Ctrl Shift and then clicking the shader. For example, you connect this, and if you want to preview textures or noises, you can do the same thing by hitting Ctrl Shift, and like I said, it will create this emission shader. So this is really useful if you want to preview your texture without reflections. Really good for checking out your 3D model beforehand and evaluating it before moving forward. So the next step would be to get something to reproject this texture on. So I'm just going to duplicate this here by hitting Shift D, right clicking so it snaps back to the original position. I'm going to rename this, so double click on the name to low poly and the original one to high poly, and I'm gonna disable the high poly for now. So if you don't have these, then it's because the filter, in this filter menu you can enable and disable all the things you want to see. So this is the default. So I'm just going to disable these so it looks like yours, and I'm going to disable the high poly, select the low poly, and then go to my quad remesher add-on. Really recommended, by the way, if you do this often. Set this to let's leave it at 5000 and then hit remesh. So all default settings. Just gonna wait a bit. Oops. Perfect. Okay. So now we got a re-topologized version, quad remeshed version of our low poly. They just created this normal map as well, which we don't really need in this case. So I just deleted it. Next step would be to unwrap this thing. So a quick way to, the way to do this is go into edit mode. So either you choose this drop down menu or you hit tab. Right. So you can either do this with the edge mode or the vertex select mode. I'm just going to use vertex select mode. And the way I do this very quickly sometimes is just by, the way I mark seams very quickly is by selecting my first vertex and then my last vertex while holding down Control. And then I'll create the shortest path between my two selected vertices. So I can quickly make a seam. Like so. And by hitting Shift, you can add and remove from the selection. So if I have something I'm content with, I'm just going to hit Control E, mark seam. I think I'm just going to extend this to here, mark seam. You can also maximize your viewport or any viewport by hitting Control and space while with your mouse in that viewport. So that's really helpful. So I'm just gonna go around this here. Like I said, this is not a UV unwrapping tutorial. I am just showing you how to do it properly. This is just a really quick way to do it. So something, oopsie, no. I'm just making cuts where I think it makes sense. Not gonna be a very pretty unwrap, but if it gets the job done for this, it's fine. Maybe one more cut here. And on the other side as well. Okay. Next step is to get your UV editor. And by this stage, I usually split my shader editor in two. So go into the corner until you see your crosshair, click and drag. Then you can split this. And if you want to join these two areas again, go into the area, click and drag upwards until you see this arrow. You can also go down. Doesn't matter in which direction you want to collapse it. And yeah, that's how you do it. So I'm just gonna split this and then choose the UV editor. Select everything. So all my vertices in edit mode. Hit U, click Unwrap. And then I'm going to hit Control Space, check this, and this is looking quite terrible. A way to check vertices like this, or overlapping vertices, is by using the UV sync selection, by clicking this, deselecting everything. I have it set so if I deselect stuff by double tapping A, usually I think it's by default Alt A, but for me it's something different, but for you this would be deselect, I guess. So deselect everything and then select the vertices that are worrying you. So you can do this by clicking and dragging, or if you hit C, you get your circle select tool. Yes, I'm just gonna select these. These are looking weird. Then I can see in my viewport what's up with those. And if you don't see them, you can quickly focus on these by hitting the comma button on your numpad, like this, and then you would also rotate around. So this is looking quite weird, and that is because this is a loop. So I'm just gonna select this loop here, by hitting Alt, clicking between two lines. Okay, this isn't really working since this is terrible. Okay, I'm just gonna delete this actually. Let me try. Yeah, it's just a flat plane. Okay, where is it? I'm gonna go to edge selection mode. Oh yeah, this is super weird. Yeah, I'm just gonna delete these faces here. So by hitting X faces, I'm going to delete those. Going back into vertex selection. Gonna close this hole here by selecting the loop and hitting F. And yeah, deleting this. I deleted this very quickly by just selecting the vertex, hitting X and then V for vertex. So everything that's underlined, that's your quick shortcut, so to speak. So same thing here. Select that ring by hitting Alt F, closing this. I don't really care about this now, but at least it's closed. Okay, select everything, unwrap again, and this is alright. Perfect. Okay, and if your if your islands are out of your UV space and oops, just gonna deselect this. Turn off UV selection for this if you want to do this. Right, if it looks like alright, then you can select whole islands by not being in UV selection, in UV sync mode, selecting one vertex of the island and then hitting Ctrl L. And that's the way you would select a whole island very quickly. So if for example one island is far too big and screwed up like this, quick way to do to fix this is to hit A while being in the UV editor, select all your vertices, go to UV, and then go to average island scale. So this averages out the scale of those, and then pack them. Perfect. So there's a quick way to do this. It's not very optimal. I suggest spending a little bit more time or using UV Packmaster or something like that to make everything more optimized. But this tutorial is not about that. So if you have something that you can work with, The next step is to create a texture you want to bake your diffuse map to. So by going to add shader and not shader, sorry, add texture, image texture, you can now create your texture file you want to bake to. So click new, you'll be greeted with this thing, with this menu. I'm just gonna name it baked, and here you can change your file dimension, so you could have different pixel dimensions for the width and the height, but I want to have it the same width and height, so I'm just going to click and drag down so it's synced up. Now I could type something in like 2048 for 2K, or I can also use math equations, so I can also type in times 2, enter, this would be 4K, or click and drag, divide by 4, and I'm gonna leave it at 1K so it bakes faster for me here for this demonstration. So you could go as high as 16K or whatever, it would just take longer since it's working with cycles to bake these. Right, so the next step is to enable your high poly version again. In the viewport, select this, hit Control and select your object you want to. Also, first select your high poly version, make sure that your image texture is connected to an emission shader and is set to the surface output, or just by hitting Control Shift you can fix this. So really quick fix for that. And then select this, go make sure this is happening here, and then hit select the other one, so Control, and then select your re-topologized version, and then go make sure your baked or your texture here is selected, you want to bake it to. Then go to your render properties up here, make sure you're not in Eevee but in cycles, because else you won't have this option. And then go down to bake, set your bake type to emit, and then click selected to active. And your ray distance is how far your the first selected mesh shoots out rays to project the texture to, or maybe it's the other way around. I think it's from the selected object to the active object. So it shoots out rays, and then if it hits something, it projects the pixels to it. So if your object is not perfectly aligned, like here, then a ray distance of 0 is not going to work, and we will get artifacts. So we're going to test this. If you're in your UV editor up here, just go to the drop down, select bake, so you can actually see what's going on. Hit bake. Wait a bit, so this is going to take longer if you have 8K or 4K or 2K. And as you can see here, there are some artifacts, and that's exactly because of the insufficient ray distance. So if I increase this to like 0.3 in this case. By the way, if you don't know how big your scene is or how big your object is, just add in a cube, for example. And if you go to your properties sidebar by hitting N, go to item, and here dimensions 2 by 2 by 2 meters. So this is 2 by 2 by 2 meters. So now you have a frame of reference. Now same procedures, first select the high poly, then your low poly, and now you can bake, and now you could see, okay, 0.3 maybe makes sense. Let's try this. Okay, this is looking way better. And I'm going to check how this looks by unchecking the high poly, selecting the re-topologized version, and by hitting Control Shift, and I'll get a preview like this. Okay, this is looking good enough. If So here you can see that I made a mistake with with the scaling of the texture of the UV islands. So as you can see here, this is way too small. So if you want to have a really nice re-topologized, reprojected version, make sure that all your islands, or that the scaling of everything makes sense, else you'll end up with stupid stuff like I did just now. But for this tutorial, I'm not going to bother too much with this. So I just unwrapped it again here. So I have to bake it again. Yeah, as you can see here, this still doesn't look good, but this already fixed a little bit. Right. Usually you would first create a new texture here. So a checker texture, I guess. So could create a checker texture, and then if you hit Control T, you would get these, and then you could change the scaling. If you hit Control A and then search for value, you can just plug this into the scale, so you don't have to change all these at once. You could also click and drag like before here and then change the scaling, or you just plug in this value node and then you have this checker texture. So this is one way, or you can create a new texture, a new image texture, create new, and instead of having blank, use a color grid, for example. Name it test, for example. Click OK. And now you could check your rescaling before unwrapping and before baking, of course. Right. So as you can see here, this is pretty horrible. So I would suggest fixing that before baking anything. But yeah, right. Another option to do this, to do a quick unwrap without having to worry about this stuff, is just to hit U, Smart UV Project, click OK, and it will create some awfulness like this. But at least it should work pretty well for the scaling. So if I rebake this again, check this, this should look quite alright. But the UV islands are terrible. And here also some mistakes, probably because of that. Yeah, but this was not a UV unwrapping tutorial, this was just a quick workflow tutorial for this whole setup. And if you're happy with your image and you want to save it out, just go here. So this little star means that this image is not saved. So even if you would save your Blender file, this image would not be there unless, I think, you go to File, External Data, and make a tick box here, automatically pack into blend file. Otherwise, just go to Image, Save As, and then save your texture. So I'm just going to bake 2. And here you can set your file format, TIFF, PNG. I'm just going to use PNG. If you want to save alpha, make sure that you have RGBA enabled, so RGB for red, green, blue, RGBA for red, green, blue, alpha. And then here your color depth, compression, and save as image. And now this small star is gone. This means it's saved, and now you have your model and your saved texture. And if you want to export this texture, this model, this mesh, just go to File, Export, and then choose your file format. So in this case, OBJ, Retopo, and then choose selection only, so you only export the selected object. And if you have modifiers enabled, which we don't here, it's by default set to apply the modifier. So if you have a subdivision surface modifier enabled on there and you don't want to have that, then uncheck this. Hit export OBJ. There you go. So you have exported your re-topologized version of that shoe plus the texture. Okay.